Hello, my name is Janine Countee, and welcome to my interpersonal communications project for HSDR 508. Next slide. As defined by Stewart, interpersonal communication is the type of communication that happens when the people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. Next slide. In my effort to maximize my interpersonal skills, I have developed an overarching goal to listen mindfully and listen empathetically at level 1. Next slide. Don't talk, just listen. My overarching goals are to mindfully listen to all my interpersonal communicating relationships. Secondly, my goal is to listen empathetically to those in my interpersonal circle, in which by doing this, it would allow those who are speaking to work out their own issues instead of me giving them solutions, answers, and advice. And on the occasion when I do speak, my goal is to have a dialogue, which is the quality of communication that is unique, reflective, choosing, and valuing. Next slide. According to Reynolds-Mead, enlarging the conversation is open-hearted communication that fosters connection, trust, intimacy, and respect. It is about knowing and being known as we peel through a multi-layer process together. It's not about getting people to do what I want them to do, but instead about creating mutual beneficial solutions and relationships. It's not about controlling what we feel. Next slide. What is behavior blend? Behavior blend is an assessment of personality traits that outlines how a person acts when communicating with people they know well and people that they don't know well. When taking the personality trait assessment at Uniquely You, the results will give you two graphs. Graph 1, this is expected of me. Graph 2, this is me. Next slide. My behavior blend is ISIDS. Next slide. These are my results. This is expected of me. I know how to impress the crowd, and I care for individuals. I feel people like me because I know how to relate to them. I resist demand and direct people. Others are concerned for my lack of preparation for detail. I'm a social butterfly. I think people are more important than rules. This is me. I'm decisive, determined, sweet, inspiring, impressive, submissive, difficult to read, sometimes, not conscientious or careful, and I don't jump into tasks without contemplating and collecting more information. I'm extremely shocked of how accurate the personality profile is, and I take pride in the fact that I do inspire people, and actually I've had at least 3 of my family members tell me that I inspired them to go back to school. Service, another trait that I have that I believe is extremely important. Jesus' whole purpose was to serve his people, and he did that when he died on the cross with dignity, determination, respect. And as a follower of Christ, I feel like I have to serve my people as often as possible. Next slide. Because I think that people are more important than rules, I have allowed the rules to be broken a time or two. During an election at school, I allowed some of the students to vote without their ID. Although the rules said you needed the ID, I let them vote anyway. Hence the thumbs down. Next slide. What are listening barriers? A major listening barrier is that listening is passive and compliant and is not as powerful as speaking. Next slide. Potential barriers for me is hearing what I want to hear. I'm very guilty of that. I assume what the speaker is going to say, and that I already know what they're going to say, and because I've been through it, and I make comments based on how I recall the experience of the topic. Another barrier for me is biased listening. I'm guilty of prejudging the value of the person I'm talking to, and based on my level of respect, I tune out the person. That's not good. Another barrier for me is interrupting, because I don't want to forget what I have to say, I may interrupt. And sometimes I get so compassionate about talking about who God is that I allow my emotional listening to come into play, where I guard myself and I tone out what I don't want to hear from others. Next slide. Dealing with my barriers spiritually and naturally. Next slide. Here are ways I deal with my listening barriers spiritually. I pray and ask God to help me to be slow to speak and quick to hear, slow to wrath. I read the scriptures and discern so that I might hear, receive, and grow by the word. Then I praise Him in advance. Next slide. Naturally, I'm dealing with my barriers by being empathetic listener, by analyzing what is being said non-verbally, ask questions to clarify for understanding, and I use the irrational approach, which decreases resistance and increases the possibility of the receiver listening to me. Next slide. 2 noise pollutions. What is noise pollution? Internal noise pollutions are being a dependent listener and being a self-conscious listener. And external noise pollutions are things that are in our physical environment that distracts us and keeps us from communicating successfully. Loud noises and traffic, views of outside activity, a talker's mannerisms, appearance, phone calls, emails, all those things are physical barriers. Next slide. Internal noise solutions. I find that the internal solution is to find something that I can use. Find areas of common interest and take initiative and work at listening. Next slide. The internal noise solution that I'm using is to resist external distractions by making eye contact, indicating to the speaker that I acknowledge what they're saying, by nodding my head and leaning forward and listening with understanding. I even write down some things that they say. Next slide. My plan of action is to leave my relationships, conversations, encounters in a better state than I found them. I'm going to have dialogues instead of trying to win the conversation, especially when it comes to my relationships with my husband. It's fun. If I hit a thud or a flat brain tangle begins, I will recall Peterson's theory and become more concerned with the other person's thoughts and perceptions. I also plan to continue to refrain from using the not trap with my son so that I can consistently foster better communication with him. And lastly, I will stroke my listeners by giving them the recognition they deserve. Next slide. HSCR 508 has been an overall enlightening experience. I've learned more about myself in the past 8 weeks than I have in a long time. I believe that at the end of this course, I have learned the skills necessary to make and keep lasting relationships with my Heavenly Father, my family, and my friends. Thank you.